Hello, good evening, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. Well, we are nearing the end of our long series discussing Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson. We've made it to the year 2012 with the release of Thick as a Brick 2. Oh yes, also known as Tab 2. That's kind of the common way that people have said it. Um, yeah, I think I mentioned before. Imagine my excitement in 2012 when I found out that there was going to be a brand new Ian Anderson record. Essentially a Jethro Tull record. I mean, when you really get down to it, obviously this was released as an Ian Anderson solo record and not a Tull record, but it is in effect it is another Tull record because Tull has always been Anderson's vision. It's all a part of the same canon, so who cares what name he uses. He explains a little bit in the line notes of the next album, Homo Eroticus, that he's trying to distance himself from the Tull name because Jethro Tull is the name of an agriculturalist and not a one-legged flute player. um, but yeah, it is quite an interesting album. The last songs that we had heard from Anderson, we had a pair of solo albums that were more or less collections of nice acoustic songs, which I really like. I really like Secret Language of Birds. So quite unusual that all of a sudden 9 years later he announces to the world that he's going to make a full-blown progressive rock concept album, and that's exactly what he delivers, and it's fantastic. I remember being concerned at first, thinking, I hope they don't step on the toes of the original Thick as a Brick, because you hear Thick as a Brick 2, the sequels, it's almost like an automatic disappointment. The sequel can never surpass the original, but I think at the end of the day, this album holds its own quite well. You know, obviously the instrumentation is a reference to the '70s. It does sound a lot like the classic prog version of Tull. Um, but it does hold its own conceptually. The concept behind the album, and really the major thing that links it to the original Thick as a Brick, is whatever happened to Gerald Bostock. Does it say, yeah, whatever happened to Gerald Bostock? Of course, Gerald Bostock in the original Thick as a Brick was the 10-year-old boy who wrote the epic poem Thick as a Brick, which Ian Anderson then covered, and it's all a part of that illustrious concept. And obviously Gerald Bostock isn't real, but he wrote the lyrics to the original one. Wrote the lyrics. Wink, wink. So the concept behind this one is saying whatever happened to him, and it dwells on themes of kind of like parallel universes and themes of fate versus fate and design versus free will and free will and those kind. You know what I'm trying to say. Those words are just flying out of my brain today. I don't know what it is. So that's really cool, and then how the album is structured is that it presents us with 5 different possible fates of Gerald Bostock, 5 different life paths that he could have gone down since the original. So the 5 Geralds that we get one who becomes a major player in the world of finance. He becomes a banker. We get Gerald, who is possibly abused as a youngster and ends up homeless. That's kind of a creepy one, although there is a bit of classic Anderson humor thrown in there, which is quite good. We also get a Gerald that is drafted into the military and goes to fight a war. Very dramatic. We have 4th Gerald, who joins the church and becomes a successful evangelical type person. And the fifth Gerald leads a rather ordinary life, and he runs a small retail shop and has a wife, and he builds model trains, which is lovely. So yeah, that's the concept, and like I said, it doesn't tread too deeply on the original, but it uses kind of themes from the original album's concepts and applies it to a new, fresh album, which is cool. I think it was great too, because it brought Thick as a Brick back into media attention. The original got some media attention when this came out as well, so that's all good. And the band, obviously, I'll talk about the band. Obviously, totally different band from the last Tull record, which was .com. Including there's no Martin Barr. That's obviously quite notable. Crazy, isn't that? And like I said, musically this band is doing that classic 70s prog kind of a thing. So we don't really have the same Indian influences or the world music influences of Roots to Branches or .com. But that's fine, That was that era. That belonged to that era. That's cool. So anyway, yeah, we get Ian Anderson, of course, on vocals, flute, and acoustic guitar. John O'Hara on Hammond organ, piano, and keyboards. Love that retro Hammond sound. There's some great bits there. David Goodyear plays bass guitar and a bit of glockenspiel. On drums, we have Scott Hammond, who's a fantastic drummer, and he's up there with Barry Barlow and Dom Perry for me. I think Scott Hammond is a very good drummer. He's fantastic. And the other newcomer with his golden locks, effectively replacing Martin Barr, is a man named Florian Opale. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Opale? Florian Opale? I believe he's of German descent. And he's a fantastic guitar player. Very, he's got some fantastic chops, and there's a lot of points on this album where he gets to show it off. Lots of great little instrumental sections on here. But yeah, I think I hope I explained the whole concept and all that, and blah blah blah. I hope I got that out clear, because we're gonna start talking about the songs. Because if we don't talk about the songs now, goodness, I'll be here forever. That's another quite quick thing I should mention. A key difference between Thick as a Brick 1 and Thick as a Brick 2 is Thick as a Brick 1 is effectively one piece. I mean, obviously there are different sections to it, but they're kind of difficult to discern, and they are, totally linked together. And tab 2, it plays, when you play it, I mean, all the songs seeg, for the most part. Most of the songs all seeg together, but the songs are much more distinctive on tab 2. Like I said, they are effectively sections of a bigger thing, but this might be better described as a song cycle than like an actual 40-minute epic, because like I said, the songs are quite distinct, and a lot of the songs you can take out of the album and they sit very nicely just as songs, which is cool. Now we can talk about the songs. Sorry about that. So the album opens with From a Pebble Throne. And the actual opening, I think, is fantastic. It's one of the musical references to the original Thick as a Brick that I think is fantastic. I love it. We get the sound of wind in those pianos. Bum, 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 bum. That section that kind of divided the first and second parts of the original Thick as a Brick, and that's so triumphant. Again, we hadn't heard an Ian Anderson record or a Tall record for 10 years, and that's such a triumphant way to return. And that winds its way into quite a nice little acoustic intro, which winds its way into a heavier rock song. So we get that classic early 70s Tall thing of, the contrast between the folky acoustic stuff and the heavier rock stuff. So that's good. It's a fine little song, quite nice. I actually like the musical the guitar line in From a Pebble Throne, where we get the that's really nice. That's a tasteful little reference to the original. This winds its way into the Pebbles instrumental, which works as a fantastic overture for everything that's yet to come. Great little bit of instrumental stuff. The whole band is playing really, really well. The production on this whole album, I should say, is really, really good. Stephen Wilson did the production. Thanks, Steve. Yes, the Pebbles instrumental is really good. My only complaint with the Pebbles instrumental is the fact that he sings the name of the album. Thick as a brick. That bugged me a little bit when I heard the name of the album sung, because Thick as a Brick is I associate the melodic singing part of that I associate with the original. But it's not a big deal, whatever. It's not of detriment to the album or the song even. Not a major one anyway. So the instrumental winds up, and that has kind of a sense of finality to it, right? That instrumental at the beginning, the big, we get the band has the big finish and all that, and then we get something that's kind of new with Anderson's stuff. We get the spoken word recital kind of bit, where he recites a verse. It's quite cool. It's I think it works. His voice sounds pretty okay on this album, all things considering. It's a bit thin, but I was impressed with his vocals on here. So yeah, Might Have Beens is the first spoken word bit. Then we get Upper Sixth Lone Shark. Now this is where we talk about the first Gerald, who the banker Gerald. I really like Upper Sixth Lone Shark. I think that's an excellent sneaky intro. I love that. I love that little acoustic guitar line. Doom 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 doom. Where does it come from? Where is it going? Really good stuff. Kind of quintessential Anderson stuff. And that sets up our banker Gerald, and that leads into Banker Bets, Banker Wins, which is a little more high energy, kind of a bit more of a rock song. Florian gets to flex his guitar muscles a little bit, which is good. We also get a very important melody for the album in Banker Bets, Banker Wins. That main da 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 da. I think I did that wrong. I'm sorry you had to listen to my horrible melodies. But yeah, there is a key melody for the album that pops up in that song, so that's cool. The next track is "Swing It Far." This is the first bit that talks about homeless Gerald. It's kind of talking about a disturbing issue, really. I mean, in this particular Gerald's life, it sounds like he gets abused in school by somebody, and it ends up traumatizing him, and he ends up adrift and dumbfounded, which is the next song on the album. But "Swing It Far," which kind of talks about the abuse factor, is very nice, very theatrical. We also get a couple of verses sung by Ryan O'Donnell, who became Anderson's backup singer for the tour, and I think he's still with him. And he's a very good singer. Ryan O'Donnell is very good at capturing the classic Anderson voice. Should mention that. But yeah, "Swing It Far" is really good. That leads into "Adrift and Dumbfounded," which is actually one of my favorites on the album, to be honest. I really, really like that song. Some classic Ian Anderson folky stuff, that nice kind of arpeggiated line, really like that. And it's got some of those rock elements, that but it never goes full rock. It always kind of winds its way back into that acoustic bit. Aside from there's kind of a random crazy jam in the middle. That kind of pops up in the middle, but it keeps you engaged, and it keeps the prog epicness of the album intact. The fact that it has that little interlude. So yeah, "Adrift and Dumbfounded," one of my favorites on the album. That winds its way into "Old School Song," which this was another highlight for me when I first heard it, because it starts out, we get that big Hammond organ crunch, really good. So it's a reprise of the that classic theme of the original "Thick as a Brick." It's not a complete reprise. It's a variation on that theme. It's a little bit different. But it's really, really good. Again, it ties it into the original without stepping on the original's toes. It doesn't cheapen the original at all, but it's a nice reference to it. And yeah, great performance, great song. We're talking about military Gerald now, and this winds its way into Wootton, Bassett Town. This is probably the most serious part of the album. It gets very dramatic and very. The unfunness of war is very present in the music. We also get the reprise of the "Banker Bets, Banker Wins" melody, presented in a slow kind of. It's orchestrated. I think our keyboard man John O'Hara has does the orchestral patches, which are quite cool. It's not my favorite on the album, but it is the dramatic focal point, I think. And that winds its way into "Power and Spirit," which gives us some classic Ian Anderson humor. I like that a lot. It's quite funny. This is the televangelist Gerald, and we get to the acoustic verse at the start, and then we get the big heavy "I see the light." That's not the actual lyric, but conceptually he's talking about how. God spoke to him and told him that he must become the priest or whatever it is. It's kind of that song is kind of similar to "Swing It Far." Actually, I forgot to mention in "Swing It Far" the punk section. Obviously, it's very dramatic and theatrical, but there's a great little punky section in there that's cool. But yeah, anyway, moving on to where we are. "Give Till It Hurts." is carrying on the religious Gerald's story. And this is good, the kind of quintessential Anderson folk. It's a very short, tiny little song. I like the intro, Let Us Pray. Yeah, and then he just goes right into the vocals. That's really cool. And we get a funny little bit of animated vocals at the end talking about giving till it hurts and that. Quite good. Next song is Cozy Corner. This is fun. It's almost like it's like a little piece of cartoony music, really, and we're describing the simple Gerald, who just simply runs a retail store and has a nice wife, and he talks about his model train hobby, and he uses locomotive breath as a nice little reference there. That's kind of cool. That goes into Shunt and Shuffle, which is again talking about the rather ordinary Gerald. And this is again the heavy rock song contrast kind of thing to contrast Cozy Corner. I'm not as big a fan of that riff. Din 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 din. Wasn't my favorite riff on the album, but yeah, whatever, it's all good. This leads us to what I think is the highlight of the album, which is A Change of Horses. This is a fantastic song. This is one of the best things Ian Anderson's done in a long time, I should say. I really do think it is. I love A Change of Horses. And again, you could take this song out of the concept, and it makes a really solid 8-minute epic on its own right. There's some great lyrics in there. You know, some 10,000 hours have come and gone. 50 long years from home. Talking about looking at one's life from the other end of it. And it's deep stuff. Beautiful melody. I love the quiet bits and the loud bits. We get a great little bit of playing in an instrumental section, and that melody is just so grand. Quintessential Anderson. A Change of Horses, one of the best things he's done in a long time. That brings us to Confessional, and this is where we start wrapping. Everything kind of starts wrapping up a little bit. I like the Confessional. I like Confessional better. I like the little acoustic guitar that kind of winds it all in. And then Kismet in Suburbia is the kind of the rock answer to the quietness of Confessional. And that one is I really like that song too. At the end of the album, each verse is talking about each version of Gerald. And each Gerald kind of has his own problems, and it shows no matter where you are in life, whether you're a banker, you're homeless, or you're a priest, or an ordinary guy, or whatever it might be, or a military guy. There's universal problems that we all face. Maybe that's one concept of it. I don't like dissecting lyrics, though. You know that. And then the album wraps up with What-ifs, Maybes, and Might Have Beens, which kind of reprise of the melody of this, like the main melody of this album, which like I said is on Banker Bets, Banker Wins, and Wootton, Bassett Town. So yeah, and then the album wraps up. We get kind of a quick little instrumental bit, and it winds its way up, and we get the original chorus to Thick as a Brick, which I thought was ultimately really nice. Again, there's always that risk of, are you going to cheapen the original by doing that? But how else were you going to end the album? I love at the end, he even says, your wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick, too. And that's quite funny. So yeah, I hope I haven't bored you. I hope I haven't talked too long. It feels like there's a lot to talk about this album, because this to me is the Anderson comeback album. Obviously Jethro Tull had been a touring entity for about 10 years or so after the release of .com and that early 2000s era. They were still a touring band, but as far as new material goes, there was really nothing. So this to me is more of the comeback album than Crest of a Knave. I'll put it that way. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for tuning in and dealing with my near incoherent ramblings. Stay tuned for the last album that we'll talk about in this series, unless he makes another album very soon. We're going to talk about 2014's Homo Eroticus. So stay tuned, and we'll see you then. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hit subscribe, hit like, comment, all that fun stuff. We'll see you soon.